Hello, and thank you for watching this video. I am Maughan of team number 1142. My advisor is Dr. Vinodh Chellamuthu at Utah Tech University in St. George, Utah. We will be discussing Problem C, People Ruin Everything. When humans move into a new environment, it has been well documented that this has effects on the native wildlife of that area. Relevant to this analysis, the anti-predator responses of prey animals is generally diminished. Habituation is a natural process where, when something is repeatedly exposed to a stimulus which does not harm it, that thing will naturally diminish its response to the stimulus. In their everyday lives, prey animals must be on constant lookout for potential threats so they may escape or defend themselves when threatened by a predator. However, repeated exposure to humans can diminish these defense mechanisms. When one learns of this effect, a worrying question may arise. What happens if animals stop being afraid of their predators? This study will attempt to answer that question. In our analysis, we will look into the effects of human interaction on the dynamics between predators and prey. Then, we will attempt to predict what may happen after humans abandon an area and the long-term consequences of their interference. This model makes a number of assumptions. First, in reality, an ecosystem is a complex web of interactions between a variety of different species. To narrow the scope of the problem, we will only consider wolves and elk. These two form a predator-prey relationship which is modeled with a modified version of the Lotka-Volterra predator-prey model. Inherent in this model are the assumptions that the prey population has no issues finding food. The predators rely entirely on the prey for their source of food. A population grows and dies proportional to its size. Other than what is explicitly modeled, the environment does not change, and the predators have no limits to how much they can eat. Finally, this is a long-term analysis, but not long enough that evolution will come into play. We will assume the effects of evolution are negligible at the timescales in the model. This also includes evolutionary pressure which humans may exert on an environment's inhabitants. To begin the model, when a predator and prey interact, there will be some chance of the prey being eaten. This rate needs to be able to change, so we will make it a function. Specifically, it is a function of the base chance the predator will succeed and an anti-predator response factor. By structuring the equation this way, only the base chance of a successful hunt causes prey death when they are fully alert. However, as the anti-predator responses diminish, the chance of them dying approaches 100%. Next, interaction occurs at some frequency proportional to the populations of the predators and prey. There is a natural birth and death rate. These will depend on the number of animals there currently are, and more rates which we can adjust. Now, on to the predators. There's still a natural death rate, but the growth rate depends on their ability to find and eat prey. Because we assumed they entirely depend on the prey for food, we can simply model growth as an interaction between predators and prey. We can use the rate of predation from earlier, but we need an additional rate which controls how frequently they reproduce. Our final equation models the anti-predator response. This changes over time depending on their interaction with predators and humans. Human interaction lowers this by some rate h, and predator interaction increases it. This depends on how frequently they interact, their chance of dying, and the current value. It is important to note that prey only learn from interactions between predators if they survive. As such, we subtract the chance of them dying from 1. One last thing must be noted. Joffrey et al.'s analysis is a long-term generational study. To include this, we will keep track of each generation in a list. As a new cohort is born, we add a new item to that list. When a generation dies, it gets removed. This also allows us to track the average age of each group. The new generation will inherit the anti-predator responses from their parents. A generation will not be able to begin reproducing until it reaches maturity, and new members of that generation will be born only as long as the previous generation survives. The death rate of each generation is dependent on age. Assuming a normal curve, most animals will die around their average life expectancy, with some standard deviation included. As stated before, the animals in our study will be elk and wolves. The following parameters were found in literature. The next parameters were found using the sum of squared error estimation technique. This was done so that the habituation of animals, when in contact with humans, behaves like the data in the given paper. Important to note is the H value. When humans are not currently in the model, it will be set to 0. The last parameter was tuned manually in order to find a reasonable equilibrium. We will be modifying this in a moment to test the stability of the model. Our analysis will be split into 3 different phases: before humans arrive, while they are there, and after they leave. First, before humans arrive, we find a steady state. This is done by running the simulation for a while without human interaction. When humans are absent from the model, H is set to 0. The predators and prey form a natural dynamic. When there are more predators, there are fewer prey, and vice versa. There is a notable jaggedness to the prey graph due to the generational aspect of the model. Small increases in population occur when a generation becomes old enough to breed, and small decreases occur when a generation dies off. Experimenting with the predator growth rate, here's what happens if we increase it to 0.07. The wolves grow to larger numbers before falling off, which leads to more drastic reductions in the population of elk. Now let's decrease the predator growth rate to 0.04. The predator's curve has smoothed, and the low points of prey populations have increased. There are also significantly more elk in general. If we plot the elk and wolf populations against each other with a line moving over time, we get the following 3 graphs. There is a notable difference in the magnitude of the spikes, but overall the predator-prey dynamic holds the same form for each value. Overall, there is a fairly stable dynamic between the elk and wolves. We use this as evidence that this is a reasonable model. Next up, we introduce humans into the simulation. Similar to the data given, the anti-predator response of the prey shows a sharp decline as soon as humans are introduced, then approaches a lower asymptote. When looking at this form of the graph, we can easily see that human involvement has caused a dramatic shift in the populations of both predators and prey. After a brief period of transition, a new equilibrium was established. There is one more step in this analysis. What happens if humans move back away? Humans entering and leaving the area both cause dramatic and fairly sudden shifts. Notably, even though the humans left the area, a long-lasting change still occurred, and it did not return to how it was before. The time of 300 years was chosen simply because it allows the model to find a new steady state at each step. Here's what happens if we shorten the duration of human occupation to 250 years, 200, 150, 100, 50, 25, 15, 10, 5, 3, and 1. In very brief periods of human interaction, there is minimal disruption. However, anything beyond that can cause dramatic and unpredictable change. The changes seem to depend on whether the prey are in a period of remission or not. When humans leave, it can have any kind of effect, depending on the current state of the environment. Next, we will attempt to limit environmental change by reducing the amount of interactions between humans and prey. This will be done by appending a multiplier to the -h times a term of the change in anti-predator responses over time. Here's what happens if we lower the interaction rate to 80%, 60, 40, 20, 10, and 5. As the frequency of human-prey interaction decreases, the effects of human presence and eventual abandonment diminish. The changes they cause in the environment are more subtle and less chaotic. This is a significantly more effective way of minimizing impact. To recap, we found that humans moving into a new environment caused unpredictable and permanent changes. Leaving the area was not an effective way of mitigating the problem. Because the populations of predator and prey ebb and flow, the introduction or abandonment of humans can cause unpredictable changes, as it seems the effects are dependent on these predator-prey cycles. It seems any duration of human occupation has an effect on the wildlife. Even small effects were observed after only a year of occupation, so limiting the duration of human involvement was not an effective strategy for lowering environmental impact. However, what was found to be effective was limiting the interactions between people and animals. This resulted in less dramatic changes to the population dynamics, to the point where an effect was barely noticeable at 5% interaction. An important example of limiting interaction in the real world is the common advice to not feed wildlife. This can have a variety of harmful, unintentional consequences. One notable to this analysis is that feeding wildlife makes them a lot more comfortable around humans. As we have seen, that can be an issue. These conclusions should be taken with a grain of salt, however, as this model isn't perfect. The scope of the model was narrowed considerably by choosing only 2 animals in the study. Interactions between every species influence the goings-on of nature, so we have cut out a lot of important nuance by not considering these other animals. The model also makes no attempt to distinguish between natural areas and those which are taken over by humans in their colonization. The land is an important factor which will naturally influence these animals, and looking into that could lead to a more compelling analysis. This is an example of one way this model can be improved. If animals are driven away from their homes and forced to occupy a smaller portion of land, this will likely have effects which could be modeled. Next, the model could be improved by including more animal groups. This would give a more nuanced picture of the effects of human habituation. Further, you could include various different species which compete for the same resource. If one species is affected more than another by humans, does the other species get an advantage? A disadvantage? Another option is to study animals which come to reside in human cities and compare their behavior with those who stay in nature. Jaffrey et al. Theorized that there may be a selective pressure exerted on animals nearby cities, where those who are more predisposed to live within one will be more likely to do so, thus causing a natural selection effect. Thank you for watching this video. I appreciate the opportunity for learning presented by SCUDEM through this competition. Further, I would like to thank my advisor, Dr. Vinodh Chellamuthu, for his unending support and guidance. Again, thank you, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.